The creative cradle, Africa, the creative cradle. My gosh, on this panel you have Kweku Mandela, as well, a global citizen. Probably one of the largest voices in the world, music, our universal language. But I approach this with you with some humility in many ways, as we have Zinga coming here to moderate this panel. I was not born in Africa, but both my parents were African, and I've laid my blood and my soul into the soil. I often say I buried my heart in Karamoja. And it is a great honor to see you all coming here together for this incredible panel, because I believe Africa, with its youth, represents the future of humanity. And if you can see it, like truly see it, then it is coming. So Zinga, do we have our panelists with us? I'm very happy to introduce for the last panel, Zinga. Thank you so much for this evening.
Thank you so much to everyone who's in the room, sticking around, paying attention for the most part. We really appreciate it. As Solomon has said, the next panel is about the creative industry. We know that other countries like France see such a large contribution to their GDP from the cultural economy. People having this fantasy about what it's like going to France. Africa is so rich in culture, music, and art. And I'm so, so pleased to ask my panelists to make their way to the stage. Thank you so much, Solomon. I'll see you shortly.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, on this panel, the Minister of Art and Culture and Creative Economy of Nigeria, Hannatu Musawa. Ozwald Boateng, OBE, who's the CEO of Ozwald Boateng. Adebola Williams, the Group CEO of Red. And Thebe Ikalafeng, the founder of Brand Africa. Kweku Mandela is going to be joining us a little bit later on, but in the interest of time, we're going to begin. Okay. Please may I ask for some silence in the room. It is the final panel. We have incredible esteemed guests from across the continent and the diaspora. I know that you've been paying attention for a while. I'd ask you for the last 15 minutes or so to give some respect and some silence to the incredible names that are on the stage. Thebe, can you please pass the mic to the Minister?
To the Minister.
And then. Oh, I thought you were going to pass it to Adebola.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all so much for your time this evening. Minister, perhaps I'll begin with you. We know that arts and culture is not just about having a good time. There's a tangible economic benefit and intangible cultural capital that comes from music, art, and there's a diplomacy that comes from a country's art. We know Nigeria is harnessing this and shining on the world stage. I just want to tie it in with the theme of what's happening at the World Economic Forum as well, rebuilding trust. How do we use art, culture, and the like to do that?
Looking for Mamadou.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you for everyone being here. And thank you for your patience waiting for our panel. Well, the first thing I want to say is, as Africans, I think part of our identity is actually our culture, our arts, our talents. I mean, when you read about Africa, you know, it's all about that culture. And not just in Africa, when you look at Black communities all over the world, even during the most toughest challenges of the Black community, it's all about how they express themselves creatively and culturally. So now we're at a point where the whole world is interested in African art and talent. Everywhere you go to, every nook and cranny, you're bound to hear Afrobeats. You're bound to hear Amapiano. So, you know, it is the time, I think, for us as a people. I speak about us as a people because it's not, I come here representing Nigeria, but it's not just about Nigeria. It's not just about Africa. It's actually about the Black people. It is a time for us to be able to cultivate and to be able to nurture the creative and the talent that we have in a way that can resonate and use the messaging and transformative power of the arts, culture, and creative economy to build trust. You speak about trust being the sort of, that's the theme. for this year's forum. But yes, through the Ministry of Arts and Culture, because of the power of messaging that it has, I think we can communicate to people in a way that resonates very differently. When leaders speak, it's very different. But when artists speak, it resonates in a very, very clear way. I keep on using the example of this last year's Time magazine. Taylor Swift was last year's Time magazine. I can bet you Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister Sunak, Joe Biden, every president can speak. But once someone like Taylor Swift speaks, the power that it has in her, and for me as a Nigerian, there's a statistics that says 1 out of every 4 African is a Nigerian, and 1 out of every 5 Black person has Nigerian descent or something. And I look at that and I see a power in that. We want to take the stage, the world stage, and see what we can through this transformative power of this industry, to see how we can bring our people together, to teach the world about who we are as a people. So yes, we talk about building trust. This we can do through this creative industry. And we can do that by having transparency and accountability. For us, for example, in Nigeria, we're trying to build the industry in a way that gives securitization, things like IP, things like infrastructure. These are things, because this is a very new ministry. And the first time in Nigeria, the president saw it fit to build a whole ministry that was structured clearly on this industry, because he knows the power of this industry. So I know, where we don't have much time, but I just want to reassure everyone here and everyone who has access to see what we're talking about, that the creative industry, not just in Nigeria, in Africa, is ready to unite the world and to speak to the world in a different kind of way. We want to reposition ourselves so that we have a different narrative. We want to use the creative industry to teach people who we are as a people, to reconnect and to build the unity that our forefathers always knew as Black people and as Africans. So I hope I continue to have time to speak about all the wonderful initiatives that we're going to do as a ministry, and our vision to try to reconnect with our African brothers from one country to another. Do a tour whereby we can reconnect through the creative industry, because despite everything that is happening in the world, is through the creative industry that people find one voice, through songs, through art, through fashion, through just being creative and talent. This is the one language I think we all speak, and we want to harness that in a way that will rebuild trust and give the sort of messaging that will help us recondition people's mind about things like sustainability and climate change. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Adebola, I'd just like to pick up on a point that the Minister made now. What's the intersection of politics and arts and culture, particularly in an African context, and how best can we use that?
Interesting. So art and governance, intersect in many ways. There's usually a trust deficit with governments, not just in Africa, but around the world. And there is always a close tie of trust between art and the people, because the people are art and art is the people. And so the people find their expressions and their identity in culture and through their cultural ambassadors. And so every now and again, government must pay attention to its creatives, to its ambassadors, and engage them in a way where they can help them build trust for governments who really do care. I was in Rwanda over Christmas, and there was Move Africa by Global Citizen, which was supported by the Rwandan government, and which, they're speaking to the Nigerian government now, and the minister is passionately trying to bring them. And, when the president brought Global Citizen, the idea was to bring these ambassadors, these artists that the people love to hear and see, as a medium to further connect himself to the people. So surely, artists, creative ambassadors are key for governments to build trust. But the other thing they do is that they are key to build trust and be a connection to the world. They make the world feel familiar with your country. So if I play a song here now, and it may be a Davido song or Buga by Kiss Daniel, and the whole room bursts out and they are dancing, as a Nigerian, they see me differently because they connect to me through songs. So governments also need the creatives to be their ambassadors for foreign direct investments in Africa, or on the global community to help with peace and other issues like climate change and so on and so forth.
Thebe, you are an expert brand builder, passionate about Africa, have been before it was cool, and have seen so many countries on our continent. We're speaking about a lot of intangibles right now, but practically, what's the value that we could be harnessing about African art and culture, not just for ourselves, but for global consumption, like in this room today?
I'm so glad you started with that. If you look at Africa's share of the global creative revenues, we're only 3% of the $3 trillion value of the creative arts. So you can see that we are actually not even a player in the space. And I know this for sure because when you look at the study that I've done for the last 13 years, Brand Africa, Africa's best brands or the most admired brands, 80% of the brands are non-African because us Africans do not have a confidence in that which is ours. And until we have confidence in who we are and what we can create, we will not be able to grow our share of the global creative product. And of course, now if you look at those 80% I talked about which are non-African, some of them will include brands such as Netflix, who are only investing, what, for the last few years or so, they've invested about $200 million in the creative industry in Africa. What we should be looking at, we should not be looking at Netflix or any one of those organizations to invest in Africa. We should be looking and applauding an African bank which is investing $1 billion in the film industry in the continent, and that's an African business based in Africa, investing in the African creative space. So to me, that's where we ought to be looking at if you're looking at what we need to invest in. What we need to invest in, we need to invest in more stories coming from Nigeria, for example, whether it's a wedding party, which is one of the highest grossing movies out of Nigeria. What you should be investing in, in fashion that is inspired or made in Africa by people like our brother Ozwald Boateng here. We should also be celebrating and be at peace that you can look like Ozwald or you can look like Adebola, and both of them are beautifully African at any point in time. Because a lot of times, a lot of us, we think that if we only look like Ozwald, that's when we have arrived. But we actually have arrived whether we enter through like Adebola or whether we enter through Ozwald, because the beauty of our continent is the diversity of our creativity. And whether it comes to the food and all those, and perhaps I'm a bit more fortunate that I've been to every single country in the continent and every single island, so making up all the 60 countries, including the ones which they still don't want to let go, St. Helena, Reunion, Mayotte, and the Canary Islands where I was last one. So until we get to that point, we'll never be able to share in this. And until we start celebrating a movie like Tarzan and Wakanda, we will never ever be able to celebrate our own movies which talk about witchcraft and all those things, because that's part of our culture. We're stealing somebody's wife and all those things. That's who we are. I mean, what I like what Professor Zeksim just said about many of these movies out of Hollywood. And he talked about the Tarzanization of Africa. Because if you look at movies like Tarzan, they have this crazy little scrawny white man who comes into Africa and beats the living hell out of Africans who are scared of him, and we call that a hero and we celebrate them. And it's what the Guardian said, and it's what the Guardian said, it's about us as Africa being seen as this white man coming to save Africa. Africa is only going to progress when Africa saves itself.
Fantastic. Also, if we're talking about building brands, you are one of, I would say, the most famous Africans that we've seen, not just for this decade, the decade before. You are gold standard when it comes to how men aspire and people aspire to dress. Talk to us about how you build a brand. I know some people don't like being referred to as a brand, and the lessons that we can learn in this room as Africans to really go into global spaces and succeed and be consistent in that success.
I need to reclaim my time. You told me 30 seconds and everybody's doing 2 minutes.
No, I'll definitely do 30 seconds, that's for sure.
No, we need you to do 3.
Because we were discussing jollof rice and I didn't want to get into that. So, in the VIP room, so we won't get into that. But no. I think the key for building a brand, and let's say if you're from the African diaspora, is to work out the why. You know, I don't create without purpose. That's always been the intent. And, you know, starting off in the UK in the time that I did, which is in effectively the late 80s, you know, and growing up in the 60s and the 70s in London, you know, being a man of color was challenging. So the key was, how do I create a voice for someone who looks like me in that world and still keep my tradition as an African? And so what I did is I created a blend of communication. So color was something I came very well known for, and color was one of the symbols of my continent, right? But I put it in a language that everyone could understand. So it's all about creating purpose around what you do and what you, how do I put, because, you know, when someone says, oh, what does it take to build a brand, it's quite a complex answer. Because, you know, right now, you've got the creative minister here. You know, there's a lot of funding required. You know, there's a lot of infrastructure required, right? There's manufacturing, there's financing for the manufacturing, it's advice on how to set up your company. Because when you're a creator, you just want to create. You don't want to be dealing with all the nuts and bolts of business. But in the case of myself, I had to learn through trial and error. And so I think the reason why I've been able to succeed is because I think just as a creator, I made sure that I created things that people would love and appreciate. And it has resonated that, and that's really what led to my success.
All right. Thank you so much for the brevity of all our panelists. We are going to wrap up the panel. I'm going to start from you, Thebe, and end with you, Minister, in a sentence or less. What needs to happen to really make sure that conversations like this and the state of the African creative industries really is at a level, Thebe, where we're competing on a global scale in a meaningful way? A sentence or less, no?
I'll just do a word then. I think what it requires Africans to look in the mirror every day and look at who it is that who's looking at them, because the person that's looking at them, that's their customer. And if they have confidence in that person, they'll be able to build this industry.
Thank you.
I think as Africans, we must stop seeking permission and just focus on action. The world has realized that we are the cradle of culture. Culture is the soul and the source of human existence, and they are demanding for us. In 2022 alone, African music was streamed 13 billion times on Spotify alone. Yes, you can give African music a round of applause. And so, but the question is, if we're only making barely 3% of the global GDP, then where is that money going? It's not coming to Africa, like many things that have been taken from the continent, and we're not getting the resources and the dividend of our resources back. And so we as Africans and friends of Africa who are in the room need to operate in a new order of engagement to ensure that the returns that Africa deserves truly comes back home. Thank you.
Thank you, Adebola. You reclaimed your time.
I mean, how do I follow that? I'm going to leave. I'm just going to leave it with that. I mean, the thing is, what he's actually talking about is how do we take more of the value? And I think technology is going to enable us to do that more.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, you've said it all, Mr. Adebola. You both said it all. But again, I want to reiterate, you know, arts, culture, creativity is what we are as a people. It is the ideal of which our very identity comes from. I think it's the vehicle that we can use to really resonate in a way that we can unite ourselves in a fresh way, in a way that we've not seen before. And I think it's very refreshing to me to see many governments all over Africa and are realizing that this is a clear vehicle that we all understand one language. And if it means that us as a nation, Nigeria, will somewhat take the lead in that, we are ready to do that, to use this vehicle that I've been given, the service to the people, to see what we can do for the black race. And honestly, the sky is our limit. So I'm looking forward to what the vision that Marcus Garvey had years ago, talking about one Africa, the way we see ourselves. And we can do that through, again, the transformative and powerful power of the creative industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our esteemed panelists for your insight, your drive, and your brevity. Really appreciated. A round of applause, please, for them as we wrap up the panel discussions for the night.